Okay, seeing the time, we'll get started. I'd like to welcome you all to this special lecture. It's the second in a series that we've kind of started and hopefully will continue. We call it an exit lecture that is given by some of our senior colleagues that have recently retired or are retiring, and meant to give them a chance to spread their wisdom from their career. I will do the intro today. It will be Todd Moore that introduces our speaker, Bob Pelton. Todd?
All right, thanks, Alex. So I don't know if Dr. Pelton needs a lot of an introduction. Just an amazing career. 39 postdocs, over 60 grad students, over 100 undergrad students, over 300 papers, huge impactful scientific contributions. Paper chemistry, paper sensing, and also inventing thermosensitive microgels. But anyone can read that from a biography. The reason I'm doing the introduction is I was actually one of Bob's PhD students at a year range I prefer not to disclose at this point. But in the past, a couple things I learned a lot from Bob. Number one was how to write a paper. I just want to read you. I pulled up the first paper that I wrote and the comments Bob wrote on my first draft. I want to read you a couple of them. This is a rambling discussion. 5 year overselling this. This paragraph is a factor of two too long. Then it gets better. I know that what you mean by this phrase, but no one else will. And then it culminated, the last comment, the last 15 pages were blank. He gave up, I think. The last comment was, is this a word? So I think certainly my ability to write papers was strongly influenced by Bob's mentorship. But I want to share with you just two quick anecdotes of where I think I disappointed Bob during my graduate school days. The first was when we were in northern Switzerland doing neutron scattering. I often went with him on trips. He said it was because of scientific reasons, but I think that the main reason was because I don't drink, so I could do the designated driver thing at night after this. But he, unbeknownst to him at the time, I can't drive a standard car, which is what he rented in northern Switzerland in the middle of a cow field. And that was the last trip he ever took me on. So the other one, I'm not even sure I told him this, but I was probably my first year in grad school, and one of my colleagues was presenting her master's thesis. I slept in, or I don't know why I was late, but I was late. I didn't go. I felt a little bad about it. It's like, it's okay. And Bob sent me an email saying, you should have been there. And he's right, I should have been there. And I think just his ability to mentor from a scientific standpoint, but also from how to be a good colleague and how to be a good person. That was definitely something I remember, and I think something all his families remember. So I'm really happy to, we miss you in the department, Bob, but we're really happy you're back for the seminar. I'm looking forward to what you have to say.
Thank you, Todd. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Oh, I heard Mike Brooks' exit talk, and it was really excellent, and so I fought against doing this, but here I am. I never use outlines when I give a talk because not my style, but this is such a goofy one. I thought I should give you an idea where we're going. I'm going to start off with a sort of summary of my career before I got to McMaster, because it'll major that they actually hired me. Then I'd say something about a few of the research projects I have fond memories about, and some closing observations where I get my final say. I'm wearing my oldest that I haven't lost. I had older McMaster hats than this, but I seem to have lost them. So I don't wear this very often because I don't want to lose it. So it's for this special occasion. So where did I grow up? This is the house where I grew up. This is a really old picture. You can tell by the cars and the gas pumps. This was probably back in the 1920s. But my dad was an automobile mechanic. He bought this garage. It's on, if you go on Coots and get to the, they just keep going west, and you get to Woodstock, and then just before, 10 miles before you get to London on Highway 2, this house is still there and the garage is still there. So it was a very nice place to grow up. Out in the countryside, most people there were dairy farmers. This was my school where I did my primary school. This was a one-room schoolhouse. Now this too is an old picture. Well, I think when they first built the school, it was a one-room schoolhouse, which meant that grades 1 to 8 were all in the same room at the same time with one teacher. This is the class list. This is me in grade 2. It's the only picture you're going to see of me today. What was interesting, the way this building was set up, it had a very high room, and then it had a big basement. And when you went in September, the basement was full of chopped up wood, like literally full, and it had a furnace in it, a wood-burning furnace. And this was run by the local farmers. Most of the teachers were just local farm girls that just finished grade 12 that had no teaching qualifications. The farmers didn't want to pay a lot. And by the time I left to go to high school, they got rid of the wood-burning stove, which meant they could make another classroom downstairs. It became a two-room schoolhouse. But I think in everyone's life, you have one teacher that made a difference. I'm going to just highlight a couple in my time here. And the first one was my teacher in this school. The final one I had there was Mrs. Lucas. I thought she was ancient. Looking back, she was probably 40. But she talked about chemistry all the time. She was very excited about chemistry. So I went to high school after that, and everything changed. And within a couple of years, all these little schools disappeared, and these little school buses went through the countryside, and they had big centralized schools. And I went off to a big centralized high school. I'm not going to say much about high school. I hated it. I was a nerdy kid, and I couldn't write. I still can't write. When I write with paper, no one could read my writing, and I can't spell. I was told I misspelled one of my colleagues' name last week, and there's a good chance, maybe we have a little contest, how many spelling mistakes you can find in my presentation. So I didn't like high school much. I did okay except for French, which I was horrible at, and Latin, which I was even more. We had to take 1 year of Latin. It was disgusting. Then I went to the University of Guelph, and I went there because they just became a university when I was in grade 13. And if your marks were good enough, they would accept you right after Easter out of grade 13. So that's the only reason I went there, was to miss my last 2 months of high school. But it was a really fun period in my life. This was in the late 60s. And you know, the cliche as sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, there's a lot of that went on. It was a heady time. There was the only bad thing that was going on in the world was the war in Vietnam, and Canada was involved in this. And we felt so bad that finally in Guelph, the Highway 6 used to go right through the center of the campus, so we protested about this and blocked the highway. That was our big protest. So I took honors chemistry. My highest mark was computer programming. This is obviously the early days of computer. I often wondered if I shouldn't have stuck with that. Lowest mark was 50% in physical chemistry, which was thermodynamics. I'll get back to this later on, but 50% back then meant that you actually failed, but they had some confidence that you'd probably pick yourself up. And so 0 publications for over a bachelor's and master's. Talk more about that later. My other great teacher was a guy called Joe Prokipchuk. I don't know if he's retired now. He taught organic chemistry. He was by far the best lecturer I ever listened to. And so I went and worked for him as an undergraduate in his lab, and I did a master's with him. Joe was not a good researcher. He didn't publish much, but he was a fantastic teacher. Other guy has done a couple of really big things for me. It's a guy called Ron Fawcett, who was an electrochemist then, and he went on to UC Davis. I'll tell you why I listed him. So coming out of this heady years at the University of Guelph, Back then, it didn't cost much to go to university. Student loans were really generous and easy to pay back. Nobody was worried about their resume. You get a university degree, you do whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly, when I graduated in 1971, there were no jobs. First time ever. Since it was a huge shock. So I had, for nearly a year, I was looking for jobs. I did supply teaching in a high schools in London, Ontario, which was really awful. I still hate high schools. And then I got a job in the nutrition department, Guelph, taking blood samples from rats where you snip the end of their tail, and I don't like rats either. But this had an impact on me because suddenly I started worrying about my career. Nowadays, young people are worrying about their careers in public school. So I finally got a real job, and it was Unioral Research in Guelph. And this was actually a big research lab. They had about 100 people working there when I started. Unioral was, they sold car tires, made and sold car tires, but they also did car parts, polyurethane foams, that sort of thing. And they also did they had a huge agriculture chemical business, which they made chemicals in Elmira. So I worked on polyurethane foam car bumpers. I learned a lot about polymers. Most importantly, I realized if you really wanted to be an independent researcher and not just a technician, you needed a PhD. So I decided I wanted to do a PhD. And I decided the two fields of interest are polymers or colloids. So I wrote Paul Flory, who had gotten the Nobel Prize in polymer chemistry, and said, gee, can I come and be a graduate student? He wrote me a very nice letter back. And these days it was letters, like on paper, come with a stamp, the whole bit. Unfortunately, I didn't save it, but it was a nice letter. So now people are sending me these kind of emails asking me the same thing. So I'm always careful to answer them back because I remember getting an answer from him. After hunting around a bit, Ron Fawcett from the university said, you should think about Bristol University in England because it was one of the top 4 centers in colloid science in the world. And one of the things I learned working for Joe Prokipchak was if you want to do research, work for a really important, famous person who's into research, not somebody who's just a good teacher. So I went to Bristol. This picture of my wife, Helen, and she was English, and she had migrated to Canada, and then I dragged her back to England. The guy below her was my PhD supervisor, a guy called Ron Ottewell. He was a Cambridge man, very, very nice guy, ran a huge group, had a lot of funding from ICI and English China Clays, these big British companies. And I saw a lot about how big groups worked and didn't see him a whole lot, but that was okay. The third guy made a big impact on me, is a guy called Jim Goodwin. I don't have a picture of him, but he was a lecturer, means a junior professor, but he worked in Ron's group, and he was actually the guy there every day you could actually talk to and learn things from. So I did a PhD in cationic monodisperse latex, which was a very hot topic back then. And I got 2 publications. Okay, so in case you have not been paying attention, and I don't blame you, 10 years spent 2 publications. I've hired undergraduate summer students who had more publications in that than I got in 10 years of education. So not looking very promising for an academic job. So when I was 1 year into my PhD, and I did the PhD in 2 years, Ron Fawcett again, my electrochemical friend from Guelph, sent me an advertisement for a postdoc job at a place called Paprocam, which is the Pulp and Paper Research Institute of Canada. It still exists in a much reduced format. It's now called FP Innovations. And they flew me over, and I had a 2-day interview, and they offered me a job. So I had to go finish my PhD and come back. So it was nice finishing up a PhD and not worrying about what I was going to do afterwards. So that worked out well. This is in Point Claire, Quebec, and I learned a lot about the pulp and paper industry, and it was a huge industry then. When you went in the front door of Paprcan, there was a list of 50 Canadian pulp and paper companies, and they were all putting money in this place. So there was about 300 people there. There was lots of research money. It was really good. So some people that were very important. The first was a guy called Henry Bolker. He was important for two things. One was, shortly after I got there, he said, "You want to go to a CIC meeting in Vancouver?" And I said, "Sure." So I remember stumbling around the halls of UBC, not knowing anybody, and CIC meetings were pretty quiet then. There was something going on here and something going on over there, but it was not an ACS meeting. And I stumbled in this meeting of a polymer group. I thought, I like polymers, so I went and listened. I hear a guy called Jim Golette give a talk about something called polynipam, which I'll say a little bit more about later on. So that was important. And the other thing, later on, when the year after I came to McMaster, I heard the NSERC started the NCE program. And I heard that Paprcan were put in the NC, National Centers of Excellence. Do they still have them? They stopped them, I think. These were big money things. So I phoned up Bolker, actually phoned him. We didn't text much back then, and said, "Can I be on this?" He said, "Sure, send me a budget." I'm not very good at money, so I just got a spreadsheet, and I think it was a 4-year thing. It's what, $500,000 each year for 4 years. So this is my second year at Mac, and my operating grant, I think, was about $20,000. And we got it. We got it. So I went in 1 year from 20 to all this money. So it revolutionized my life, so I thank Henry for that. Two other people important out of Paprcan at the time. One is Dave McDonald, this guy here. He was Bert Brockhouse's last graduate student. He was a master's in physics, and he had very high positions at FP Innovation. Sadly, he's younger than I, but he died a couple of years ago. It was really tragic, which was surprising because he's a super fit guy. The other guy, there was a series of senior managers. One was Joe Wright, who used to be in the ChemEng department at McMaster. Then he went to run the Xerox. He was head of the Xerox lab, and then he was president of Paprcan when I was there. These guys all helped me a great deal. And Dick Karakes, who was a professor out at UBC, finally, he's retired, but he helped me a great deal too. So I did well, but finally get a serious number of papers and a patent. Things are looking more promising. I went to Union Carbide then. I would have stayed at Guelph or at Paprcan. I was very happy there, but my wife prodded me on. That's a good thing about wives. They prod you on. She said, I could do better. So I worked for a guy there called Des Goddard. He was one of the founding authors of editors of colloid and surfaces. He was a cosmetic colloid chemist, I call him. He did a lot of work on that. And I learned, while you've read all this, I learned a lot about industrial research and a lot about silicone chemistry. And when I was there, toward the end of my period there, Archie Hamlock contacted me, Archie Hamlock from McMaster, and he wanted to go out to dinner with Helen and I. I assumed he was taking us out to dinner. That was wrong. I ended up paying. He thought I was a rich industrialist, but we met him downtown Manhattan. And the purpose of the dinner was he said, "There's going to be a job at McMaster. You should apply for it." So I did. So that was McMaster. That's how I got here. I'm just going to move on a bit and mention, so first I'd like to mention the chairs, the early chairs. And the early chairs in ChemEng were every 3 years, and they're all this kind of caretaker. It was the departmental administrator ran everything. But these men I have to thank them because they made me teach chemical engineering thermodynamics. You know, the thing I got 50% on? Well, I taught that for 10 years. The first class I taught in it, I was horrified. I had this textbook, Smith and Van Ness, maybe they still use it. And I was working through it, and a lot of smart faces looking at me, and one of them was Heather Sheardown, who is now the Dean of Engineering. And I'm pretty sure I was only a page or two ahead of these people in giving this course the first time. So, a really important guy for me at McMaster is Doug Keller. I have a lot of things I'm really bad at. One is details, just details. I'm bad at details of organization. I'm really bad at money. I refuse to do money. So he looked after all when we got these big grants, we had to deal with a lot of accounting. He took care of all that. More importantly, I'm a little bit like Donald Trump. I believe the last person I talk to, and I get all excited about something, that he'd say, well, have you thought about this? So he saved me from a lot of stupid mistakes. Other people have helped me a lot. Christina Trollope in the ChemEng off. I am the last standing person who's been an academic here who never used Mosaic. I have never logged on to Mosaic. And the only way, for reporting your marks, all that, I never did any of it. And Christina did a lot of it for me, and Doug. And I'm very proud of that because I heard how frustrated everyone else was with Mosaic, and I couldn't be bothered. Milo, does Milo still exist as a name? Is it spelt right? Is my first spelling mistake? So Milo helped me a lot. The last three names here, Mamdouh Shukri, Mo Albasawi, and Peter George. Peter George was a president. The other two were deans and then VP researchers. And these three men, I think, really changed the whole emphasis on research at McMaster. And particularly in engineering. I'm not sure about the rest of the campus, but they had a really positive impact. If you went with them for an idea and say, I just need $100K to get this started, they give it to you. So I've had amazing students, postdocs, summer students. I've collaborated with a bunch of people. If I misspelt your name or I've forgotten you, I'm sorry, but that comes with the territory. I'm an old geezer now. My administrative positions, I didn't have any. I was so lucky to be a chemist in a chemical engineering department that got me out of all sorts of things. And towards the end of my time in ChemEng, it got me out of teaching a lot of potential courses, including thermodynamics, because I was no longer a legitimate engineer. So I'm not going to criticize the administration much, because I figure if you didn't do much in it, you shouldn't criticize it. I was on the board of governors. If you get a chance to do that, that's a really fun thing to do, because it's a lot of high-level decisions made there. I'd like to say, talk a little bit about research. Not much, but a bit. So I'm really lucky with funding. I've had a number of CRDs, which are now, I think, Alliance grants, because I had a lot of industry contacts, and that worked out. I'll list two or three of the long-running ones later. And I was really lucky with these National Centers of Excellence, because basically for most of my career at MAC, I was on one of these and running them. I was the top scientific director of both of these two for most of the time. So I never had money worries, and in fact, I didn't have to write a lot of research grants, which was nice. So I have had no Mosaic, not writing a lot of research grants. That's pretty good life. So research from the Paprika era, 17 publications. This first thing I'm not going to explain to you. It's the thing about recycling, about making newsprint. And you pesky young people don't buy newspapers anymore. So it's, but this was actually the only thing I did, which ultimately ended up in being used in production, and it was for a number of years. The other thing was polynipam, and isopropyl acrylamide. I'll quickly tell you the story there. I'd heard Jim Goet talk about this polymer out at the CIC meeting, and it has the simple property, it's highly water soluble until you heat it above 40, and then it phase separates. For reasons I won't go into, I was very interested in grafting the stuff onto clay for a coating, for a paper coating application. And I had a summer student, a guy called Philip Shabante, who I think now is a professor out at UNB. And we were trying to mix it, putting clay in and putting monomer and trying to get it to stick, and it didn't stick. And I failed. And one of the reasons I failed, looking back on it, is that I didn't seek help. And that's been a problem for me, is I'm pretty much of an introvert. I'm the kind of guy that likes to go to the poster session when there are no people there, and you can just walk around and look at the posters, and you don't have to talk to anybody. So there's an obvious way of solving this problem. That would be to use silane coupling agents. And I didn't know anything about them, and I was too dumb to go ask about them. So instead I said, well, let's just polymerize the NIPAM, throw in some cross-linker and see what we get. And what we got was a uniform dispersion of hydrogel spheres who shrank and swelled depending on the temperature. And this was an electron micrograph of these. So these are uniform spheres that dried on a surface and formed an array like pool balls pulled together on top of a pool table. And then the vacuum came on in the microscope, the water was all sucked. So these black things are actually discs, dried polymer. So this is a pretty big deal. You see all sorts of nanoparticle things like this now, but back then it was a pretty big deal. And I was lucky they had really state-of-the-art electron microscope facilities at Paprika. They didn't allow me to publish it for quite a long time, which was okay. I was never scooped. I did a lot of subsequent work on this stuff at Mac. By far the most work, the best work and the most work was done by Todd, sensational stuff. And so this was good for me. I'd had a zillion citations, and it's one of the few things I'm known for. So I would tell you a couple other projects you probably don't know anything about. I was called to a meeting what's our time here? How long do we have? We have time, okay. I was called to a meeting at, can you tell me when I have 5 minutes left? I was called to, asked to join a consulting meeting at INCO. They had a big research lab in Sheridan Park. And I came into this room and there was about 10 people, most of them Americans and Europeans they called in, and they were talking about problems they have. And INCO produce nickel. They're actually been bought and sold a couple times now, but then they were INCO. And to get nickel, the ore is called pentlandite. And one of the reasons I chose to talk about this example here today is there's all sorts of talk about new mines and things like that. And I think there's a lot of real opportunities here in Canada. There are a few classical mineral processing departments in universities, mining departments, and I think Toronto has one, and McGill, but these tend to be stuffy old places, and it's really difficult to pull out the things you want. So for people working in separations, this is a good area to get interested in. Anyway, so the way this flotation works is you grind up the minerals to chunks that are a micron size, and then you treat them with a thing called a collector. And what you're trying to do is selectively hydrophobize the pieces you want and not the pieces you don't want. And the hydrophobization agent for nickel is very simple. It's this thing here. It's a short alkane chain, and then it's an alcohol that's reacted with carbon disulfide to make this xanthate. So it's kind of ugly chemistry. It's not very nice environmentally, but works really well. And so when you put air bubbles through these hydrophobic particles stick to the air bubbles, the others don't. The trouble was, and it probably still is they have a lot of nickel ore that is contaminated with something that's essentially like asbestos. They're small rods of things they don't want, like nanoscale rods. And these are positively charged, so they tend to stick to the pentlandite surfaces, and they just mechanically, even though you have this very thin layer of this stuff here on the surface, so it's just it's less than a nanometer thick, you have these big rods, big meaning they might be 50 nanometers in diameter and 100 nanometers long, that are blocking the surface. So I proposed that maybe we could use hydrophobic nanoparticles instead of this collector. So we did a lot of work in this. I had a number of good students, people like Songtao Yang, Carla Barca, who I think is still in the area working. And it worked. Got lots of nice papers, lots of nice students, but it was just never practical for reasons I don't have time to go into. Another flotation project was earlier. You can tell by this sort of stuffy old design here. When I first got here, there was a lot of interest in recycling newsprint. So newsprint is basically just paper that's printed with carbon black, and the stuff that rubs off your hand. It's not hard. If you're going to recycle it, you got to get rid of the carbon black. It's not hard. You put the paper in water and stir it up, and often spontaneously the carbon black comes off. But then how do you separate it? And flotation does work, but it didn't work very well. And our hypothesis was that if these larger ink particles would absorb on the air bubbles, but they were easily dislodged by hydrodynamic forces in a flotation column. So we had the idea of reinforcing the attachment by blowing silicon oil in with the air feed. And I don't think anyone had ever introduced anything in flotation through the air feed before. And this worked. I had a really good master's student. I wanted to do a PhD. He was so talented, Joe Mielo, who did this. And then Paprika were very interested in, so we worked with a guy called Jim Finch at McGill, who was a real flotation guy. And he had a big de-inking column flotation setup working in Quebec. And it works. I don't know if anyone's doing it, but we got some nice papers. The other thing I'm really proud of is the Sentinel Bioactive Paper Network. This is the final NCE. This was put together after the mechanical pulp ones had done their, and we wanted to do something, the paper industry wanted to do something more in NCEs, but it had to be something really different. So there was Theo van der Ven, me, a guy called George, Theo van der Ven's a prof at McGill, George Rosenberg, who worked on the other networks with me, a guy called Chris Hall from University of Guelph. He was the bio guy. And who am I missing? I'm missing him. Doesn't matter. I remember Chris Hall. We'd be in meetings saying, trying to come up with a vision and what it would do. And this statement here, bioactive papers, was the one we finally went with. And so how do you do that? How do you make a sheet of paper so that it detects things, that it kills things? So we were trying to put this team together. And I remember the day Chris, we had said, well, Chris, who do we get? We don't know any bio people. We were all paper and colloid people. And he said, well, aptamers. He said, there's this guy at your university, Ying-Fu Lee. You need to get him. I had no idea who Ying-Fu Lee was, but there he is. And so it was really fun building this together, and we did a lot. We got lots of publications. Yeah, I've listed all here. I'm not going to read through it. You've already read through it. We've had many students. Many of our students have gone into academia themselves, and some of them have ended up here. So that's something I'm pretty proud of. Other projects I liked, these were projects with companies where we had on probably 2 or 3 rounds of collaborative research grants with NSERC, so over a decade in each of these. First one was with a small chemical company that sold defoamers in the pulp mill, and I'm not going to explain it. It's a bit dull, but we had a lot. It was a good project. We got lots of paper, patent or 2, and they actually implemented it in their technology. We had a really nice 13 or 14-year collaboration with BASF on, they were bringing out a new polymer called polyvinylamine. This is a fantastic polymer. It's a linear polymer. You have a carbon, and in the second carbon, you had a primary amine. So every repeat unit had a primary amine. So for the chemists in the crowd, if you have a water-soluble polymer with all these primary amines, you can do all sorts of modifications, do all sorts of great things. And so we had tons of fun with that, many projects. The final one, ophthalmic polymers. I always tried to stay away from the bio stuff because I'm a bit queasy about that, and I'm still getting over snipping the rat's tails. And but one of my former students, Howard Kettleson, he ended up at Elcon, and through him, we got this ongoing thing looking at ophthalmic polymers. And I still remember going to meetings showing all these things with eyes. It was disgusting. But anyways, it was lots of fun. These were really good projects, really good relationships. So I strongly recommend working with companies. It's fun. I'm not going to take the time to explain this one. I don't. What time are we supposed to end? 3:30. I have time. I've been telling you all about the things that worked out. Not everything worked out, and this is one I really loved. And it's sort of the later years of my career here, and I was interested from Canada is a producer of wood pulp fibers. And we sell them internationally. It's a big product, but there's lots of competition. And now you can get wood pulp fibers that grow very quickly in tropical countries, and so you're competing with them. I was interested in can we find completely new markets for wood pulp fibers, and the thing about the pulp and paper industry is the scale. It's big. Any of these processes produce hundreds of tons of stuff a day. So, you know, little bio things and that are of no interest. The other industry I thought is really big in scale is farming, right? So you need to fit in scale if you're going to. So I spent a long time, a year, and this is where I got some money, I think, I forget which dean gave me some money to do this. So I spent a whole year traveling around, learning about greenhouses. So these are old slides. This is the time I did this, around 2000, 2005, looking at agriculture. And I quickly concluded that there's 2 types of agriculture. There's greenhouse stuff, and there's out in the field stuff. Out in the field stuff is, I didn't think we could be much opportunity there, but greenhouses, there was lots of opportunity. They tend to be more profitable, so the particular thing we honed in on was I visited a greenhouse down in Vineland. When you're driving towards St. Catharines, you'll come to a place where there's a small research operation there in Vineland. And they took me in and showed me these greenhouses where they were growing tomato plants. And it was all done hydroponically. There was no soil at all. This thing here is a porous material called rock wool. And when they use it, it's covered with plastic. Here it was just ripped off so you could see it. And this was the matrix for growing tomato plants. And so here is one plant coming out of here. And these plants were enormous. They grew up to about, 30 feet in length. So they were too big, too high to fit in the greenhouse. So they had these wires so that they kind of zigzagged up. Enormous, enormous plants. And it was very sophisticated. They cycled fluids through this. They would drench this thing, saturate it once or twice a day, and then let it drain. And they measured all the ions and pH and conductivity and all the nutrients in this, and did material balances constantly, and very sophisticated. But at the end of the day, this thing here, they just throw away. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of acres of greenhouses around the world using these things. And when you finish with it, you've got the slab, which is not biodegradable. You can't reuse it. It'd be too hard to clean out the roots that are dug down into here. So I thought, surely a really good application, a high-end application, because these are pretty profitable operations, would be to make replace this with a foam made from wood pulp fiber, stuck together by polymers. Two things I love the most: fibers and polymers. And I had a lot of big meetings. I had my friends at BASF. I flew to Germany. On one side of the table, they had all the paper people and polymer people. On the other side, they had all the plant protection people. And they all looked at me and they said, "Oh, it's too early. Show us you can make this. Show that you can do this." So it failed. So some of the things you do fail, even if I still think it's a good idea. So when I was an undergraduate at Guelph, I was in the science faculty, and we were very scathing about the agricultural community. And we were happy to be a real university. But really, when you go up to Guelph now and drive around, you see all these, around the university, all these agrichem businesses that have research, and a lot of Ontario government buildings there. The feds are there. This is something, we're very close to Guelph, and there's a lot of money. Some of the professors, they don't even bother with NSERC grants. They get a lot of dough from all these other ag sources. So learn about it. I think there's some real opportunities there. For those of you in bio, the nice thing about agriculture is if you actually invent something that has much lower hurdles to implement it compared to doing things inside the human body. So go learn about what's going on at Guelph. I just thought of a story about being at the University of Guelph, since I have some time. I forgot to tell you. When I went there, you saw where I grew up, I was a real hick. And I used to, one of the things we hicks did was we would go out shooting woodchucks. Woodchucks were a thing out in the fields and that. And so when I went to Guelph, naturally I took my rifle with me to Guelph. And you couldn't keep it in your room. You had to keep it in the proctor's room. But on Friday afternoons, after my last chem lab, I would go to the proctor's room, get my rifle, walk across campus with it over my shoulder, and Guelph was right on the edge of the countryside, and went out shooting woodchucks. Imagine walking across McMaster now with a rifle over your shoulder and see how that would go. So I've seen big changes here, an increasing focus on research. which I think is really good. Sort of something I've observed, I wasn't directly involved in it anyway, but there was a switch in funding from the VPR, Vice President Research, a switching of funding, the Vice President of Research, most of that money went to the deans. And that was a really, really good thing. That had a big positive impact on engineering. It sounds like a trivial thing, but it's not. In administration bloat, I'm not going to say anything about it. It's just something I observed. Since I didn't work in administration, I had stayed away from it. I'm not going to comment. I'm not sure most of it we could have helped, but it's definitely there. Well, let me talk about the Chem Eng department. When I arrived in 1987, before I came here, I talked to a lot of other people, and I realized that Chem Eng had a really, really big reputation in North America, at least, and I think everywhere. And the big guys, most reputations in places are built on a few people, and the rest of us just tag along and enjoy it. John McGregor, Archie Hamlock, and John Brash, and John Vakopoulos, these were all international leaders in their field, incredibly well known and readily important. Shortly after I arrived, I mean within a year or two, Hamlock retired. He announced he was going to retire. And McGregor went, he kind of disappeared more slowly. He was around less and less and less. And then, but these were really, really important people. And how are we going to get the process control group? What's going to happen to it without McGregor? And who's going to do polymers without the famous Hamlock? So I think this was a critical time in the history. It could have gone either way. So I would like to talk about, in my time, 3 transformative chairs. The first was Andy Rymack. Andy oversaw huge renovations in Chem Eng, and this took a lot of his time. And up to then, in my time here, I saw no sign of renovations. All the things I were in looked ancient. And more importantly, he hired Carlos Felipe and Shipping Zoo and Todd Hoare. So Shipping Zoo was, so another change that happened then, I think it happened with Rymack, was up to then we'd had, before Andy, we had 3-year chairs and all the people, and it just kind of moved around the department. Everyone got a chance at it. No one wanted to do it. And when you get into a 5-year chair, and if you do 2 years, that's 10 years, then if you're going to agree to do that, then you should actually do something. And Shipping did. He was very strategic. He hired really good people. He pushed for research productivity. He pushed for measurements, measuring data, being quantitative. Then there's Carlos. So to me, Carlos is the greatest Chem Eng chair in my time. And he did taught me the meaning of goat. So, what are you? You are a goat chair, in my view. Jake, you were after my time. I have no opinion. So, final thoughts. Things have gotten a lot tougher. I'm not sure I would even survive as a young academic now. Attracting good students and postdocs is far more competitive. When I first started, I was getting letters every day from the top schools in China and India wanting to come, and they actually came. If you said, yes, we'll take you on. Whereas now you can say, you're probably still getting these letters and say, but they don't come. They end up going to Harvard or MIT or some other place. Don't blame them. The other really big challenge, I think, is getting noticed. When we look at the amount of science and engineering that's being generated, when you look at what's coming out of the Asian schools and that, and the volume of material in journals, how do you stand out? I mean, how do you do that? It's a real challenge. When I look at my things I could have done better is I think I could have collaborated a lot more. It wasn't in my genes to collaborate because it meant you had to talk to people you didn't know very well. I probably could have done a lot. I followed the model of my PhD supervisor, which was just to see them occasionally. And we never had very many group meetings. So I was a pretty passive. I had some spectacular students who seemed to manage it on their own. Todd fumbled a lot, but the others were good. And also marketing. Marketing is really important. Nobody has time to read the literature. When I first started out, you expected to go flip through the journals, write out a little index card for each paper you were interested in. If you're really interested in, you typed out a letter and sent it to the guy, and they'd send you a copy. I mean, now there's just so much stuff. So how do you do that? How do you do that? Okay, so summary. I've had lots of luck, and I've had really great people supporting me. So this leads to the question, what next? So my grand plan is not very impressive. It involves hanging out with these guys. I live with Sydney and Emma. Sydney is now 7, and Emma is 2.5. Golden retrievers, lots of dog hair. Carlos comes and visits me frequently and goes home with his own supply of golden dog hair. This picture of my 2 granddaughters, Claire and Quinn Mitchell, I'm very lucky they live in the street behind me. They feed me most nights of the week. This was from 2 summers ago, so they're 20% bigger now than they were then. So that's it. I had no idea what to do in this talk, so I hope I haven't put you to sleep. Happy to answer questions.
I need to run out to do a lecture, but it's a fantastic talk, and it was so much fun work with you for 10, 11 years. You're such a supportive guy, and really deal with, I don't know whether John is here, John Brennan and me to a less degree, and so it's so wonderful. I do have a question. Some of the observations that you have, I think is dead on, and everybody loves columns. Me. But one of the things I want to ask is, you talk about how unique you are, which I believe you are unique. But is that the generational thing? Do you see more people like you when you got hired and work with these wonderful people? Or is it just you being unique? Because I also see the changes in my department in the university. I think it's now more structured and emphasize on a lot of publications, emphasize on whether you can get money right way, judging based on the papers and so on.
Yep.
So I wanted you to make a comment on that before I go to
Judging on I wonder about judging on the papers, because if you look at Google, I got 340 papers. I have some really high, for chemical engineering, some really high citations at the top. But when you go down to the bottom, and you ignore the things like conference presentations, abstracts and stuff that don't really count, I have a bunch of papers, and I remember working on every one of them that have 0 citations. I didn't even bother citing my own work. So counting papers, and even, I know there's a lot of emphasis now in working with high-impact journals. I'm not sure that makes much sense. I've always believed in working in niche areas where you're not competing with huge numbers of people. So by definition, if you're working in a niche area, if you're working in pulp fiber flocculation, there's about 15 people in the world that care about what you do. So you're not going to get a lot of, but you have a real chance of doing something that has an impact if you're the 1,000th person who started working on hyaluronic acid for lubrication, then it's probably you're not going to make much impact. So I don't have any good answers for you. And I believe old guys should stop standing around worrying about the young people. The young people take care of themselves. Gosh. It's Friday. Yes, sir.
What are the characteristics of the best graduate students you have?
I judge the best graduate students at the end of their degree when I often walking to the PhD defense, and I think, what of all this body of work, what has the student brought to this? What things that they have done that I would have never thought of doing? And all the good ones, I suggest doing this, they do this, and it has a much bigger impact. So having ideas, having enough nerve to ignore your supervisor, go ahead and try your idea out. And
My supervisor is here, so.
I'm sure he'd be happy if you try all the ideas you've ever thought of without spending too much money.
Fantastic talk. How did you avoid administrative rules? Tell us your secret.
Well, first off, to be a chemist in a chemical engineering department, they had this program where you could, where non-engineers for a while, I don't think they have it anymore, where you could go take a test of legal and, what is it then? Ethics and law. I failed. So not like thermal, I got less than 50. They didn't want me. So that's one way. That's what worked for me. So.
Well, one of the things that strikes us in the administrative part of the university is that you're one of these people who had the same partner come back over and over and over again.
Yes.
A lot of people will get a CRD and the company will change direction and they'll pause. But what's the secret to maintaining these really long term? For us, it's less work, right?
The secret is to be aggressive and insist that you go visit them and talk to them. It's important that you try and get, to have a long-term relationship, you have to have a mentor or your partner in the company has to be high up enough to have influence. And you have to keep a real close eye on the company because when they're always switching people around. So it's not something where you set up once and walk away from it. If that happens, most companies will not stop funding you, but they'll just ignore you and they'll say, oh, it's a gift to the university and forget about it, and that's it. So you got to really work at the interpersonal relationships. Even if you're an introvert, you have to go see them. Now, the nice thing about going to BSF, you get a limo out to the wine country and have really fancy dinners and stuff. American companies, it's not so great. You get to go to fast food places and so on. But it's human. It's developing the human relationship, recognizing what your partner needs within the company, and be willing to change. Like when I presented the Fibers for Farmer thing to BSF, they didn't want to do that, but they said, how would you do it? And I said, well, we modify fibers in the pulp mill. So they were interested in developing new businesses of chemical additives for the pulp mill as opposed to the paper mill. So we got a new CRD. That was my last CRD, actually. So
A quick addendum to that. How do you do that as an introvert? I know
you work at it. You work at it. Trying to avoid poster sessions.
Any other questions?
Have a good weekend.